Hey everybody, it's Mindy Audlin, and welcome to our Facebook Live Q&A with me, Mindy Audlin. I am the founder of the SpiritGroups program, and I want to welcome you to our Facebook community. If you haven't already liked our Facebook page here, I invite you to like us so that anytime we're having one of these sort of impromptu trainings that you can be in the loop and know what's going on. So this is one of those kind of impromptu moments, and it began this morning. I was checking my email first thing this morning, and the first email I read was from a gentleman named Jack in Colorado, and he asked me something in his email that honestly I had to really think through. I thought, surely I have answered that somewhere before. Surely there's a video I can send it to. I could send to him, and I couldn't think of anything. So I thought, well, today's the day. Today's the day to answer this question because it's a really, really good question. And for any of you who have heard about small groups and want to know more about them, want to know, maybe you've heard about mission-driven ministry and you want to know more about that. Maybe you've heard about the SpiritGroups program specifically and you want to see how that fits into a mission-centric model. This is a really great way for you to get connected. So here is Jack's question, and I'm going to paraphrase, I'm going to condense it a little bit. So what he was asking essentially is this. He said, would you give an example? Because he had already watched the video. So I have other videos out there that give the history, and this is based on years of research and studying all kinds of different churches. So he's seen that, but here's what he was asking. He says, would you give an example of how a typical spirit group would operate, and then share your observation and understanding of what actually happens through them that creates significant growth at the church body? Whereas I believe I understand the basic concept of mission-driven church with greater active participation of the members, I don't clearly see how this increases the numbers of congregants and members. So that's the essence of Jack's question here. I think it's a really great question. So you may have a sense that mission-driven ministry is a good place to go because everyone's talking about it. You may sense that small groups are part of that, but not really see how they all fit together. So my goal in this time together is to, first of all, answer that first question, what is a spirit group? So I'm going to go through the foundational things that make a spirit group a spirit group. And then we're going to talk about mission-driven ministry and sort of the big picture of how small groups fit into a mission-driven model. Then I'm going to go into specifically the answers to what Jack's asking, which is, put it together for me. How does the group program support the growth of the membership? And before I get to that, I want to say first and foremost that the whole idea behind a program like this is not necessarily to see how big you can grow your church in terms of people. The main priority is making sure that your church is healthy, that your church is balanced, that people are having amazing, transformational spiritual experiences. And that is first and foremost the purpose of a Spirit Groups program and a mission-driven ministry. It's not about how many people are in your congregation. It's about the spiritual health of your organization. So that's where we're going today is, one, we want them to be healthy. We want your church to be balanced. And what happens typically when you have a church that's healthy and balanced is it naturally will grow. So I see people joining us. Thank you for joining us. And as you join, if you'd like to share your name, where you're from perhaps, and say hello. And if you have any comments about what's happening in your own ministries, feel free to, to give some support or say, yes, that's happened for us, or give some specific examples. And if as we go through this you have some questions that pop up for you, feel free to put those in the comments as well, and I can see you. So hello, Tara. Hello, Jane. It's great to have you here, and thanks for posting the comments, and thanks to all of you who are joining us live. So the first question I want to answer, which comes from Jack's email. So the first thing he says, would you give me an example of how a typical spirit group would operate? So that's the first part of his question. So to answer that, I'm going to give you like the nutshell version of what makes a spirit group a spirit group. Hi, Ariana. I just see that you've joined us. So we've got Colorado in the house. Wonderful to have you here. Keep checking in as you come in so I can know who's here. And if you have any questions, feel free to pop those in as well. So what makes a spirit group a spirit group? Well, there are 5 elements that make a spirit group a spirit group. And these 5 elements, if they are not in your spirit group, then really it's not a spirit group. So the 5 things, and these are the basis of a healthy, balanced small group culture. When you have this in your small group culture, it will spill forth into your ministry when small groups are the structure of your ministry. So here we go. You ready? The first one. This is the big, exciting reveal. So here it is. The first one is communion. I hope you can see this. So I had fun putting this together. So the first thing that makes a spirit group is a communion practice. And what we mean by that is in every small group, we have a practice of prayer, meditation, there are prayer partners, there's prayer support, but that is part of every session. So prayer is a foundational piece of what makes a spirit group a spirit group. Second thing you'll find in a spirit group. Here we go. These all start with C, so that makes it easy to remember. So the second one is connection. Connection is fellowship. It's socializing. It's making friends. That people connect. They have fun together. We socialize together. One aspect of every spirit group series is we have our group leaders and their groups do something fun together, something social. I've had groups that have gone do art projects together, or they've gone hiking together, or they have game night, or just dinner out, or whatever it is, but they do something that's just for fun. So connection is a big piece of that. There's always food, there's always something to drink, and we, like Jesus used to do, the bread and the wine, that's what we do in a spirit group. It's an important part. All right, number 3 is compassion. So the third element that makes a spirit group is that each group is looking out for the members of the group. So compassion means that if someone has a death in the family, someone is going through a hard time, has a challenge, the group is there for everyone in the group. That is the support system for that small group. So it may be 5 people, it may be 8 people, it may be 3 people, but everyone in the church, when you have a church where everyone's in a small group, no one falls through the cracks. So compassion is your group members looking out for your group members. That's a really important piece of a spirit group. Okay. The next one is community. Okay. Tara says these all look backwards to you, but you can tell. I like it. You can read backwards. I'll have to see if I can figure out how to fix that. Let me see. I have a button here. I'm going to see what happens when I hit it. Tell me if this fixes it. No, it didn't do anything. Oh, wait. So anyway, read backwards if you can. Read backwards. So the fourth one is community. So one of the things that we do with every one of our series, and a series for spirit groups is there's content. We'll talk about that in a little bit. And then there's the greater commitment, which includes time to do some socializing and time to do a community service project. So with every one of our spirit groups, we have the group decide what they want to do. And it can be something for the church. It can be something for the greater community. A lot of times we have someone in the group who has a charity that they really love, they already participate in, and so they can kind of rally their group together and say, hey, let's all do something for the food kitchen or for the homeless or for, I have a group where they support some marathons and they serve drinks to the runners and help raise money for different causes. So whatever your group wants to do, they do something, and that community service project is a way to practice what they're learning in the content and take it beyond the walls of your church. So that's something that you'll find in every spirit group. And then the fifth element of your spirit group program is, very important, is challenge. And challenge means that your group is accountable to your group. So at the beginning of every series, people are setting intentions for their own personal growth, their own personal spiritual journey, and they have the group to hold them accountable. And they can decide how they want to do that. There's also curriculum involved. So these are not just social clubs. It's not just, the happy hour group or the walking group. If it is a walking group, there's a curriculum that you're studying and talking about. It can be a book study. It can be your Sunday sermons. It can be the curriculum that we provide through Spirit Groups, which is a video-based curriculum. It doesn't matter what the curriculum is, but there is content that provides a challenge for people. When people aren't challenged, they fade away. So these are the 5 components of a spirit group. So when you're asking what is a spirit group, these things are present in all of them. Otherwise, it's not truly a spirit group. So that's what Jack asked. Now, all of this, for those of you that are just joining, all of this is prompted by an email I got this morning from a gentleman named Jack who's thinking about using spirit groups in their own ministry. And he wanted to have me answer some questions. So he said, would you give me an example of how a typical spirit group would operate? That's it. That's what we do. We gather together in homes, coffee shops, offices, wherever you want to get together, we get together and we go through, we learn new things and we go through, we have all of these things as part of the spirit group. Communion, connection, compassion, community, and challenge. Okay, so then he says, could you share your observation and understanding of what actually happens through them that creates significant growth of the church body? Well, so if you look at, what happens in a group that creates growth in the church body? Well, the church body is actually you and me. It's the people in the church. So we can look at it from that angle of how does it create growth in people? What we know is that growth happens through relationship, through community. And there is something that happens in small group that we cannot replicate on Sunday morning with a sermon. People generally do not walk out of Sunday morning saying, oh my gosh, that changed my life. It might give them some food for thought, and it might inspire them and keep them up for the week, but to create deep change, it requires us to be in close personal relationship with other people. And small groups provide that infrastructure for deep, real spiritual growth. So I know you're talking about the church as a whole, but before we talk about the church as a whole, you have to see how the small groups support the individuals in their own growth. When the individuals are growing, when the church is healthy and balanced, the natural expression of that is growth of the church body as a whole. Your membership increases. So one of the things that I'm going to share with you, and I'm going to get to that in just a little bit, is some specific ways that happens. Now, before I get into all the details of it, I have to kind of give you this disclaimer in that I'm from Texas. I came from Arlington, Texas, which is the home of Six Flags Over Texas. They have all these roller coasters there, and I could tell you about the Judge Roy Scream. It's the one where you go up and then you go down and go around a corner, and it's got ups and downs and curves, and that's that kind of roller coaster. But they also have the Shockwave, and the Shockwave is the one that goes loop to loop. And I could tell you about that, and I could explain that to you. But until you experience it, you're not going to really know which one you like better. So note that as I'm telling you this, I'm explaining something that really has to be experienced to fully get into your heart. So thank you to all of you that are checking in. And Indiana's here. Hello, welcome. So keep checking in, keep sharing your questions. I can see you, and I appreciate you being here. So these are the elements that make a spirit group a spirit group. Before I get into how this grows a ministry in some specifics, I'd like to give you an overview of engagement strategy in a mission-centric organization. So let me take this down. Hang with me. I'm going to take this down. Did you like that? You like my little markers and how much fun I'm having? Okay, so let's see. We're going to take this one down. All right, the power of your mission. You see it? I know it's backwards. Sorry about that. I'm still kind of learning the Facebook thing. So the power of your mission. And Tara says, experiencing it makes all the difference to understand the impact. And that is so true. So I understand that I'm feeding your head with a lot of information now. If you really want to know the power of this, we do an annual leadership summit where we get to share stories. This is what's happening in my ministry, in my group, in my own life. And in those stories, you can see how the pieces tie together. It all begins with mission, because if your mission is, kind of loosey or maybe flowery and doesn't really drive anything, then it's really difficult to create a small group strategy around it. And what happens in churches that don't have a strong mission is the Spirit Groups program becomes a program amongst other programs. And there's nothing wrong with that, because the groups have a great time and they experience growth, but it doesn't have the impact of integrating it into a mission-driven organization. I see some love coming at me because this is true. When you have a strong mission statement and you're able to connect your small groups program with that mission, suddenly you have an infrastructure that is the delivery system for that mission. For example, I see Tara's here from Spokane. Their mission is about transforming lives. That's very easy to create a strategy to. If our mission is to transform lives, then what is the infrastructure we need to create in order to create that transformation? Kevin Ross's church in Sacramento, their mission statement was, as we were playing with it a little bit, we talked about empowering people to be a force for good in the world. I know that's not exactly it, but it's that idea of, if that's your mission, empowering people to be a force for good in the world, what is your structure? What is your strategy for doing that? Small groups provide an infrastructure for delivering that mission, and here's how. All right, so the engagement model is a model for creating spiritual growth. And the outcome of that spiritual growth is what your mission is, transforming lives, let's say in this example. So if you say our mission is to transform lives, how do we create that transformation? Well, it begins by knowing how people evolve spiritually. This actually is very congruent with something that Charles Fillmore wrote back in the 1920s about how do you grow a church. He said you have to understand that people go through different stages of spiritual evolution. And if you know that and you cater to that and you hold their hand through each step and you have a system in place for each step, now you have a way of getting people to that end goal, which is having transformation, or whatever your mission may be. And I know more of you are joining, so as you're joining, feel free to say hello, check in, let us know you're here. It's also a really good idea to share this if this is valuable and you're like, oh my gosh, I wish so-and-so were on this. Share it with them, ping them, put their name in here, and hopefully they'll join us. So here is how you create an engagement strategy. This is one way, but it's the way that I see when I look at mission-driven megachurches. This is pretty consistent. And it also is very much in alignment with what Charles Fillmore had said when he was first beginning the Unity movement. So here's where it begins. When people are on a spiritual path, that path begins, step one here, it begins with exploration. And that means you're not going to invite anyone into your church. No one's going to come to your church that isn't interested in spiritual growth. That seems kind of obvious, but we don't need to go out there and market to the world. We need to find those people who are in a space where they're looking for something. They're looking for something that'll be enriching. They're looking for spiritual community. So the explorers, these all start with E to make it easy. So we have our explorers, and they're people out in our community. They're people that are watching Joel Osteen. They're watching Oprah's Soul Series. They're out there. They're reading spiritual magazines. They're doing yoga. They're eating green foods. You know these people. They're everywhere. They're all around us. And our message is really a great fit for them. So they may not be churchy people, but they're looking for something. So these are the explorers. Our first goal in an engagement strategy is to get them in our door. So that's step one. We got to get them in the door. And that can be the door of our church. It can also be the door of our small groups. We'll talk more about that in a little bit. All right, so once they're exploring, the next goal is we want to get them not just checking it out. We want to get them engaged in what we're doing. So that's the difference between someone who's just hopping around from church to church, and then you step into that place where it's like, oh, this feels like home, so I want to keep coming again and again and again. So now I was exploring, but now I'm engaged. Now I've landed in this ministry or in this small group. I come on Sundays, so I'm engaged. Once they're engaged, now we want to help them grow. The next step is expand. So the next thing is we help them expand their understanding of what we teach. So what are the core teachings and how do they work in our lives? So this is through coming to Sunday and hearing Sunday talks. It can be coming to a small group and hearing some of that content. So we're learning. And as we're learning, we are also, the next step, hopefully, expressing the things that we learn. So it's not just going into our head, it's going into our heart and it's going into our practice so that we become living role models of the things that we're teaching. That's express. Once someone has reached this stage, we can say we have successfully fulfilled our mission. If someone is expressing prosperity in their life, if they're expressing healing in their life, if they're expressing service in their life and connection and oneness and all those things through volunteerism, through community service, through the things that they're doing in your ministry, we can say, yes, that life has been transformed. We were successful in our ministry. So we have ways of measuring that success. Once they've reached this stage, now this is not the end, to create the next level of growth, this person is going to naturally grow into this final phase that Charles Fillmore described. And I call it the encourage state of consciousness, where now I don't just express these teachings, I encourage others to move through this path. And these are your leaders. This is how you take it from I'm receiving the teachings, I'm living the teachings, and now I'm supporting others in living these teachings as well. So I'm encouraging others. And when you can get people through these stages, so now you have people who are encouraging others to find your church, encouraging others to get involved, encouraging others to learn and to grow and to understand new things, encouraging others to not just get it in their heads but to practice them. Now you have scalability. Now you have the ability to have not just the minister out there growing the ministry, but everyone that's come through and experienced your mission now becomes an ally, or as Charles Fillmore said, a co-worker in supporting you and your mission of your ministry. So that is the engagement model and how it works in a mission-driven context. If you look at this in terms of small groups and why small groups are so important, small groups are a way of reaching explorers who have sworn they would never go to church again. And you know they're out there. A lot of the spiritual but not religious, they have no interest in a church. But if you invite them to your living room for a spiritual discussion, you will have much more success, for a lot of people. So small groups give you a way of reaching your explorers. Small groups also give you a way of getting people engaged. So someone can come check out a group And if they like it, of course your leader is going to say, well, join us for the rest of our series. So we have these 10-week cycles, so you can join us for the next 10 weeks. It's not a forever commitment. You're not getting married to them, but come check us out. Be a part of what we're doing for 10 weeks so they can really experience what the group's about. So it's another way of getting them engaged. Some people are finding their small groups, and then they feel comfortable in the group, so then they go visit church. And then when they visit church, guess what they see? They're friends from their small group. So it's a great way of getting people engaged. Small groups are a way of providing content. We talked about challenge is one of the core components of a spirit group. So that is a way of introducing content, whether that is spirit groups content that we create for you, or it's tied to your Sunday message or book study, whatever it might be. It gives people a way to expand their knowledge of spiritual principles, spiritual teachings, and also to express them. And not just like on Sunday where you hear the message, but in a small group, you're hearing the message, you're discussing the message, and you've got a group that you're checking in with each week. So you have an accountability to be able to take these ideas and be expressing them. So that really supports people in taking this beyond just a heady understanding and taking it into their lives. Now, the other nice thing about a small group infrastructure is your small groups is now where you can identify those who are ready to move into a leadership role. So you have scouts out there through your small groups program, scouts who can tell you when someone is really growing and blossoming in their spiritual life and ready to move into leadership as a chaplain, as a board member, as a small group leader. So you have a way of seeing how people are developing and growing. You have mentors at a really personal level. So that's the beauty of small group ministry. Without small groups, what happens is we do our marketing, we try to get them in the seat, and you get the explorers there, and then we hope they come back. And we hope they come back week after week to Sunday service, and they get a message in that service, and we hope they apply it. But we don't really know, do we? When they come and it's just Sunday service, we don't really know if they're living it in their life. We don't really know if they're ready to step into leadership because they're congruent with the teachings. So Alberta's joined us. Welcome, Alberta. It's great to have all of you here. Thanks for the comments. So we've been talking about what makes a spirit group, and now how that fits, how small groups fit in a mission-centric model in terms of an engagement strategy. When you have a strategy like this, the lovely thing about it is it allows you to be very focused in the things that you do, because you can fulfill every need that leads to your mission simply with small groups and your Sunday experience when you create it strategically. So I want to go back to the email that I received this morning. This was from Jack. And Jack asked for an example of how spirit groups would operate. So we talked about the 5 elements of a spirit group. We have our communion, connection, compassion, community, and challenge. So that's how they operate. Share my observation of what happens through them that creates significant growth in church. And for those of you that are watching, feel free to chime in with your comments of what's happening in your own ministry, because I know a lot of you are using spirit groups right now. So what happens that creates the growth in the church body? Well, there is significant spiritual growth that is observable through the group leaders, and that growth creates enthusiasm, it creates momentum that grows the church body. He says, I understand the basic concept of mission-driven church with greater participation, but I don't see clearly how this increases the number of congregants and members. And we talked about how the main purpose is not just having a lot of people. The main purpose is having a healthy, balanced church. And sort of the icing on the cake is that when that happens, your ministry typically grows. So, hello, Indiana. The next training was the question. When is the next training? So there's going to be a leadership summit that is happening in June in Austin. And there's also, I'm going to tell you, hold on to that thought, because I'm going to tell you one more thing that's coming up this summer for those of you that really want to dive in and get both feet wet and say, this is what we want to do. All right, so before I do that, I want to go back to Jack's question, because I want to sort of talk about how this grows a ministry. And I say how it can grow a ministry, because you can have spirit groups and it's just a program and it's great and people enjoy it, but it's not really part of a strategic growth plan, and that's okay. If you are using this as a strategic growth plan, you will incorporate it into your mission, and we do training on how to do that at every step of the way. We create systems and infrastructures, goals and processes at every step of the way. Okay, so in terms of answering that question, how does it grow your ministry? There are 2 ways you grow your ministry. You attract more newcomers, and you retain the people that you have, right? So that makes a lot of sense. And like Tara said, she's coming, there are those that are engaged, they take ownership of the mission in the organization. So there's more engagement. So I'm going to break this down into how do spirit groups specifically help attract newcomers. And we've talked about this a little bit, so think about it. When you have a Spirit Groups program, you have a way of engaging those people who are explorers who will never step in a church. I know I was not looking for a church. I was looking for a spiritual community. So you'll have people that are not church people who will be happy to go sit with their friend in their living room and have coffee and talk about, their favorite book or talk about spiritual principles. So it gives you another point of entry. You've got your Sunday service, which is a great way of bringing people in, but you also have these groups, which are another way of bringing in your newcomers. The other thing that it does is, as you are doing, as we talked about, one of the aspects is there's a social event, there's a community service project. So your groups are not just meeting in their living rooms, they're getting out into the community. So they are doing community service projects. We've had people who have seen our groups serving at a soup kitchen, or they bring music to residents of homeless shelters, and they do little concerts or whatever it is. They're visible in the community, and people will say, well, who are you? Where do you come from? And they feel the energy and the love that exists in that group, and it attracts people in because we're going beyond the walls of the church. So it takes your ministry beyond the walls of the church where you can be seen demonstrating the principles that we teach. So it's a couple ways. I know there's endless ways, and I'm sure those of you that are watching, you can add your own comments about how people have found your ministries through Spirit Groups. Jane says, I think the idea of depth is more accurate than width. People are loving the connection we have with each other. I've also heard many stories. So you are creating this depth of relationship that when you have that, focus on that that's more important than the width. The width will come, and it comes with time and as you integrate this into your culture. So that's one way. You're attracting newcomers because you're out in the community. And here's another great thing is it retains the people that you have. So one of the big challenges I think that a lot of churches have is people come in through the front door and they come a few weeks and then they're out through the back door. And we maybe get to see them for a little while and then they're gone, and who knows where they went? Who knows what happened? Maybe they got sick. Maybe they lost a job. Maybe they moved. Nobody knows because they just came in and they went. When you have Spirit Groups as part of your membership, and many of the churches that were using this in a mission-centric model are actually having Spirit Groups be a part of the membership model, so that the members of the church are plugged in and connected. When your members, so our goal is always 100% engagement. At our Spirit Group Summit, we acknowledge churches that have hit the 50% engagement benchmark, the 80% engagement benchmark, and our goal is 100% or more of the membership engaged in the Spirit Group program. So that's the goal, is to get everyone plugged in, because when everyone is plugged in, nobody falls through the cracks. No one has a crisis in their life that is not known by your spiritual community, because if someone's missing their group, that group leader is saying, hey, are you okay? Everything all right? Can we help? Can we support? That's the compassion piece. We are here for you as things show up. So if someone does fade away, if someone moves or someone has a tragedy and are having a hard time coming and being social on Sunday, we know about it because everyone is plugged into a small group. So that helps with your retention. The other thing that's fabulous is, just as Jane was saying, you have depth of transformation. And when you start getting those experiences out there in Sunday morning, out on your announcements, that when you are recruiting for your groups, you're bringing people up and saying, this is what happened in my life because of my group. And when you have more and more stories like that, you have a very tangible, measurable result that people can see and say, wow, I want that for myself. I want that for my friends. I want that for my family. So that helps with retention and growth. And then finally, as Tara was saying, it increases engagement. So in many of our churches, people come in and are in the mindset of being a consumer. Entertain me. Give me an inspiring message. I like the music. I don't like the music. We're just consuming spiritual growth rather than contributing to the mission of the organization. In a Spirit Groups model, your leaders, your participants, are receiving leadership training that engages them. So even if all they do is bring the peanuts, or bring the drinks, or do the opening prayer, people are contributing to the ministry. And that tiny step between just receiving, which is what happens on Sunday morning, you sit in your seat, you receive the message, and then you leave. Maybe you have coffee with someone. But in a Spirit Group, people are contributing to the group. They're contributing ideas. They're contributing in terms of participation and ideas. They're helping with serving food. They're helping with leading the prayer. All these things, prayer partners, all those things happen in a small group where they are contributing. That energetic shift makes a huge difference. Tara says people want to contribute. It's so true. And this gives them an infrastructure where they can do it. And what's nice about the infrastructure is that it's an infrastructure that they can really bring their own personality to. So even though there is a very specific structure to this, there's also room within the structure. In fact, the structure is what gives you the framework through which each group can kind of be unique. So we have groups that are walking groups. We have groups that are men's only or women's only. We've had groups that are for introverts only. For those introverts that want to make sure their opinion gets heard, they have a group just for that. So you can create lots of types of different groups and attract people, from your own neighborhood or entrepreneur groups, whatever it is. But all of the groups have the same infrastructure. I was talking with a gentleman who was at a church. I was just there last weekend, and he's an architect. He builds skyscrapers. And I was talking to him. I was curious. I said, in order to build a skyscraper, how much depth do you have to have? How much foundation, how much structure do you have to create a skyscraper? And he was explaining to me how much concrete is underground in order to create the infrastructure for that building to go that high. And this is what this program is. It's an opportunity to create infrastructure so that you can grow. Without this, it just kind of becomes who wants to do what. And, if you're getting to do your own thing, you're having a good time. If the minister's doing their own thing, they're having a good time. And maybe you like the message, you stick around until you get bored and then you're off. This creates an infrastructure where people are continually challenged. They're continually having opportunities to grow and to stretch and to contribute real leadership to your ministry. And it's challenging. So that's my final thing is, if people aren't challenged spiritually, they will get bored and they will leave. But in this model, we have this ability to, once we get it, once we've received it, like, yes, I get the teachings. I'm living the teachings. They are changing my life. Now I can encourage others to do the same thing. So I hope that answers your question. And if you have other questions about that, please share them in the comments. Tara says to create that infrastructure, it takes persistence because it doesn't happen overnight. In fact, as this gentleman was talking about building these skyscrapers, he talks about how many months they spend creating that infrastructure. He says you don't even see that the building is going to be there. Like, it's all underground. You don't even see the difference it's making, but you can't create that kind of structure without having that depth of foundation. So give yourself some time to do that. So the question came up, when are the next trainings? If you're interested in learning more, I invite you to come to our Austin June Leadership Summit. It's June 9th through 11th. It's hosted by Unity of the Hills in Austin, Texas. You can learn more about it at spiritgroups.org. And we would love to have you there. You'll get to hear stories of what's happening in the field through the ministries that are using the Spirit Groups program. And then in July, we're going to be launching a whole new program. And I don't have the information for this online, but be thinking about this. July is really the time, if you want to launch in the fall, July is the time to start gathering a little pilot group that can learn about this so that they can launch your first series in the fall. So in July, I'm going to be doing lots of these Facebook live streams to give you some tips, some tools, some what to do this week, some hand-holding in terms of how do you start using Spirit Groups and how do you begin the process of making that transition. So more information will be coming on that. Please like our Facebook page here at Spirit Groups because you'll be hearing more about that as that program comes together. But it'll be a week by week. Here's what to focus on this week so that you can launch your group in the fall and begin making that shift into a mission-driven infrastructure. All right. Well, thank you all for joining. And again, if you have any other comments, any other questions, whether we're here live or you're just watching the recording of this, feel free to post them. And I'm always checking these comments. I love hearing your comments. I love hearing how things are working in your own ministries. And if you're thinking about using it for your ministry, whatever questions you have, clearly you asked me a good question and I'm going to pop right back on here and give you my best answer that I can. So I hope that helps. Jack, thank you for your email and for your interest, and thank you all for joining. Blessings. I look forward to seeing you hopefully in Austin real soon. Blessings to you all. Bye-bye.